Hi, you won't need your Bibles. So today, I always say tonight, I don't know why, old habits die hard. Today we're going to, I thought, well, Easter's coming up. Why don't we have a look at a couple of things regarding Easter, and in particular, how do we get 3 days and 3 nights out of Friday, Saturday, Sunday? All right, so we're going to have a look at what is true and what isn't true. Some things are true, some things are not. Okay, so what we believe, if you, not us, but if you go out into the normal world which we live in, a lot of people believe lots of different things from Easter. They believe that it's a Christian-based festival around the death and resurrection of Jesus. That's fairly true. Somehow eggs and rabbits feature in Easter, that Jesus died on Friday and rose on Sunday. Now, a few years ago, I can't remember how long ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago, Telstra ran a series of ads, and I don't know if you can remember them, but there was an older gentleman driving a Volkswagen, and it was advertising I think it was the 4G network, that if you wanted to get information, you could jump on this network and download information. But he was driving the combi van and he had his grandson next to him. And so when his grandson would ask him questions and he didn't know the answer, Telstra was advertising that you could jump on your mobile and figure it out. But he just made stuff up, a bit like Easter. And so here he is. And what he said, the little grandson had a project that he had to answer a question for school, and he asked his grandfather, why did they build the Great Wall of China? And his grandfather, without relying on Telstra, because he didn't have it, made stuff up, and he said, they built it to keep the rabbits out. Right, now, we know that Easter is related to rabbits, but once they built the Wall of China, the rabbits were all kept on one side of the wall, and then we only had hares to deal with in Europe. You have to figure out whether I'm telling the lie or telling the truth. All right? Now, some of these things I'm about to read you are true. All rabbits give birth to live young. You can read that for yourself. But in the bitter cold of the Northern Hemisphere during the Easter time, it's extremely cold. So what they do is to protect their offspring, they layer them with cocoa. All right? That's a natural response to the bitter cold. Unfortunately, leprechauns tend to turn up and eat them before they have time to grow. That might not be true. Anyway, hares were used exclusively in medieval art. It was believed that they were hermaphrodites, so that means they were born with 2 sets of reproductive organs. The problem, and that was associated with Virgin Mary. The thing is that they are what we call lagomorphs. That's a real thing. They belong to the family of lagomorphs. Bunnies, rabbits and hares are lagomorphs, and they're allowed to do a thing called superfetation, which means that mum is about to give birth, she's got offspring in her womb, and she's got an embryo that's been impregnated, ready to go. So they can just keep going like that. That is real, that is true, that's where we get to breed like rabbits, okay? And so it becomes folklore. We're just going to run through some of these things. The word Easter is not something that was supposed to be used in Christian circles. It came from these, I'm sure that you've seen these things before, they're religious pagan festivals, and so in the end there were goddesses and gods from the Saxon peoples, and they had Ostari, Ostara, Ostern, Eostra, Eostre, Eostur, Eistra, Ostron, Osus. And so from there we derive the word Easter. But then you say to me, but wait a minute. Read that for yourselves. So then it was associated with rabbits, and it was associated with new birth, it was associated with renewal, it was associated with new life, and so they linked the rabbits to it. I really don't want to stay on that. Hot cross buns became then something that you could eat during Easter, because there's all sorts of rules and regulations about what you are allowed to eat and what you're not allowed to eat. So then they started to make buns, because you could eat buns. There's a scriptural reference why you shouldn't eat hot cross buns. Please ignore it. I eat hot cross buns. They're fantastic. All right? Just don't bake them to the Queen of Heaven. Now, Easter in the Bible. Easter is in the Bible, but it shouldn't be. If you have a look at Acts chapter 12, verse 4, it says that when he had approached him, he put him in prison, delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. So there you go. Well, there it is. It's in the Bible. It must be of the Lord. Actually, last Wednesday, when Paul Buckley gave his talk, he spoke about a couple of times when words had been mistranslated, such as pneuma, spirit, everywhere else. Spirit, in this one translation in John chapter 3, verse 8, it's translated as wind. They didn't understand it. They made the best fit. And so here it's the same sort of thing. It should be Passover, because the original word is Pascha. I hope I did justice to that. So it should read that he gave them, we'll go back, when intending after the Passover to bring him forth to the people. So that's the proper translation of the word that's in there. It should not be Easter. All right. So there's a lot of myths, misconceptions, religious practices around Easter. We're not interested in any of them. What we want to do is to get to the truth. And this is where we think about big fish, whales. And so Jesus said to them that were non-believers, mostly the scribes and Pharisees of his time, as you can read there, certain of the scribes and Pharisees answered, saying, Master, we seek a sign from thee, which is a ridiculous thing for them to ask, because he was nothing but signs for 3.5 years, bringing people back from the dead, healing the lame, the sick, the halt, the blind. He did incredible miracles. He stilled the seas. He calmed the waters. He controlled nature. He disappeared in front of their eyes. He was nothing but signs, and these guys were still looking for a sign. And importantly, it says in verse 20, verse 39, he answered and said unto them, an evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign. There shall be no sign given to it except for the sign of the prophet Jonah. For Jonah was very clearly not 3 days, but 3 days and 3 nights. So that's 3 24-hour periods in the whale's belly. So shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The heart of the earth would be the grave, buried, 10 foot under, 6 foot under, kick the bucket, all those other terminologies. So if Jesus died on Good Friday and came and he was arisen by Sunday morning, where are the 3 days and 3 nights? They're not there, are they? So we're going to find them. Isn't that fun? Where are they? The first thing you need to understand is the difference between our day and their day. So right now, if we walked outside at 4:30 p.m, what would you say, what part of the day are we in? Please tell me. Sorry? The afternoon. Thank you very much. But wrong. If you're in Israel, we are around about 9 p.m. We're at the end of our day. Okay? Because the Jewish day ends and begins at sunset. So sunset is about 7:30, so in 3 hours' time, our day would be at an end. It would be what we would call midnight, yeah? because that's when our day ends, true? So tonight at midnight, it's no longer Sunday, and it's now Monday. But for the Jews, they would have started their day 6 hours, at sundown, at 7:30 tonight. So if you have a look at this little diagram that I've got, hopefully you can make sense of it. Let's start with the orange. I've created 6:01. We just need something to start with. So 6:01 p.m. today, at 6:01 p.m. our day starts. It's 1 past midnight in your thinking. But for them, it's 1 past new day. Everybody with me? You do need to understand this, okay? If you don't understand, please wave or something. So at 6 p.m, we start our day and we go into the evening hours. Funnily enough, the very first part of our Jewish day is evening. It's not early morning like we would expect. If we're up at midnight and we stepped outside, it's dark, but we're in the early morning part of the day, like the end, like it's very dark. We're 1 a.m, 2 a.m, 3 a.m, up to 6 a.m, and then we start to see the sun come up. But for the Jewish day, most of their first 12 hours, as you can see on the left, most of their first 12 hours are in darkness. And they start their day with evening. Strangely enough, in the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth, he saw that it was good, and he said the evening and the morning were the first day. Remember that bit? That's because it starts at sunset. So, as you can see, the blue bit, this part of the 24-hour day is still called the evening, all right? But it's the beginning of the day. Get that around your head. So then we go up to midnight. Then we're going into 1 a.m, 2 a.m, 3 a.m, 4 down to 6 a.m. So that's the dark side of the day, or the first 12 hours. Then if you go across to the other circle, that's the light side of the day. And so at 6 a.m, we're now in the second lot of 12 hours of a 24-hour day. 6 a.m, we're halfway through the day. In our normal days, we would think that would be noon, yeah? Noon is halfway through our day in our normal day, but in the Jewish day, it's 6 a.m. So that goes up till noon, 3 p.m, 6 p.m. What's 6 p.m? The end of the day, okay? And so I'm not going to go into it, but in this dark side over here, that's where you've got the first watch, the second watch, the third watch. You'll hear that, you'll see that in Scripture, okay? And you'll see in the other side, it was the 9th hour, the 3rd hour. But it's the 9th hour since the sun came up. The 3rd hour since the sun came up, which is 6 a.m. All right? Everybody got that? You need to understand that if we're going to move forward. Good. And they're 6 hours ahead of us, always. I don't want to read all of that. But the important part, so this is the introduction of the Passover in Exodus. We know the story very, very well. I don't want to cover it in detail for you, but it talks about slaying the lamb and da-da-da. And you take the lamb on the 10th day. So the very, very first month for the Jews is called Nisan, like the car. If you want to remember that, if that's the easy way for you to remember things, that's great, like the car. Nisan. And the Passover, the day where you kill the lamb and sprinkle the blood on the lintels of the door so you can stay inside and be protected. That's called the Passover, and it's the 14th. Another important thing. So the day that you kill and eat the lamb is the 14th of Nisan. And it's the beginning, it's Passover, and the day begins in evening. All right, so you begin the Passover is the beginning of Passover is the evening of the 14th. Okay, park that. We're now going to go into the feast days. Straight after the Passover, there's a special feast. It's called the Feast of Unleavened Bread. I'm sure you've heard of it. Maybe you've never ever placed it in time. But the Feast of Unleavened Bread is a feast that runs for 7 days. The first day starts immediately after Passover. So Passover is the 14th of Nisan. The first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread starts on the 15th of Nisan. It runs for 7 days and then finishes on the 21st of Nisan. The first day is what they call a holy convocation or a special day, what you would normally refer to as a Sabbath, a day of rest, a day where you stop and contemplate and think about the Lord. All right? So the very first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread is called the 15th of Nisan. It is a holy convocation, or otherwise the same as a Sabbath. Okay? Then you've got day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. They're normal days. Go about your business, do your thing. But the one thing is you're not allowed to eat unleavened bread. You're not allowed to eat leavened bread for that whole time. And then it finishes on the 7th day with another, what we call the Holy Convocation. So we've got the Jewish day that starts at 6 p.m, goes around and finishes at 6 p.m, like ours does. Starts at midnight, goes around to noon, and goes around to midnight again, 24 hours. Their day, 6 p.m, around to 6 a.m, around to 6 p.m. That's their day. Passover, the 14th of Nisan. Straight away after the Passover, on the 15th through to the 21st, we've got the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Are you still with me? Excellent. And that is just talking about what I just said, but it's in Scripture so that it's true and I haven't made stuff up. All right? Now, that's a line. It's an orange line with an arrow at the bottom. Okay? It's very significant. And you'll see it. This is when you get carried away with the PowerPoint and you go, ooh, I can do all this magic stuff. But this is very important. Okay, so on the top, we've got, if you don't follow this, it doesn't matter. I'm going to repeat it later because now we're going to go through this. We're going to go through the timeline. Then we're going to go through the Scriptures. And then we'll repeat this so you can see it again. So we've got what we would call Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. To give you context, the religious world would have Jesus die on when? Yeah, Christian Friday. I've called it Christian Friday, all right? So for reference. So they would have him dying on Christian Friday just before sundown, if you read your Scriptures, okay? And then they've got him rising from the dead. When the ladies turn up at the tomb on Sunday morning, he's already gone. So he's been in the grave for a little bit of Christian Friday towards, sundown, all of Christian Saturday, and none of Christian Sunday. So that's a day and a half in my thinking. All right, so underneath that, you've got the Passover, followed by the very first day of unleavened bread, the start of that 7-day festival. Then the second day of the festival, third day of the festival, da-da-da. This will make sense in a minute. Up the top, you've got midnights. There's the timeline. That's what actually happened. So the orange line that it started with corresponds to sundown. So that's now the beginning, the very first orange line is the beginning of Jewish Wednesday, which I'm saying to you is the Passover. 6 hours later, we get to midnight, and so then that's the beginning of what we would call Wednesday. The Jews have already had 6 hours of their Wednesday. It's already started. That's the end of the Passover. 24 hours later, 6 hours later, we've got our Wednesday finishes. Continues. So that's the end of the first day of unleavened bread, Holy Convocation. Our Thursday finishes. Day 2, unleavened bread feast. Our Friday finishes. Day 3 corresponds to the normal Saturday Sabbath for the Jews. It's their weekly Sabbath. Midnight. And that's the end of those few days. So how does it all work? 14th of Nisan is the Jewish Wednesday. The Last Supper. Where does the Last Supper appear? Anyone? Cool. Does it work? Where's my little round thing? Nothing. Everybody agree? The Last Supper, where they eat the Passover lamb, occurs in the evening of the Passover, which is the beginning of their day. Yeah? So in the beginning of their day, which is evening, on the 14th, which is the Passover, they kill, cook, and eat the lamb. And so all of those stories, even the one that we celebrated today with our brother Brenton, when he reminded us of the death of Christ, where he shared communion with his disciples, it's happening at that time, just after the sun's gone down. They've eaten the lamb, and he parts the bread and distributes the cup with his disciples. That's when that's happening. All right, so it's the very beginning of the Passover day. Jesus is taken. Remember, what does he do after he has what we call the communion or the Passover? Doesn't he go into the Garden of Gethsemane with his disciples and says, "Come with me and let's pray." All right? And that's where he was very, very heavy with the weight of what was about to happen, and they were fast asleep. Why? Because it's nearly midnight. They're exhausted. That's why they couldn't keep their eyes open when he needed them to pray with him. So we're now in the very early hours of our day, but we're already 6 to 7 hours into their day. So Jesus is taken there, and it's around about the midnight hour. When did Peter deny Christ? What are some of the clues? What does he do? What does he do? He denies him 3 times and something happens. That's a really bad cockerel. You'd probably kill that one. When do they normally do their noisy thing? We would say around about 5 or 6 a.m., wouldn't we? Yeah? So that's when, halfway through the Jewish day, you would expect the cock to crow, yes? So halfway through the Passover, the cock is crowing. And Jesus has been taken, and Peter has denied him. So Jesus is now with Pontius Pilate and the Jews, and they're mocking him and they're scourging him. So it's an all-nighter. No one slept. They've been up all day and all night. Jesus is crucified and he is crucified around about there. Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus famously do something around about this time. What do? They ask for his body from Pontius Pilate. I think it's Pontius Pilate, can't remember. Yeah. They ask for his body because they've got to get the body in the ground before the Sabbath. But it's not before sundown. Because sundown is the end of the Passover, and a minute past sundown is the beginning of the next day. And the next day was, in John 19, a holy day. A high day, or a holy convocation, or a Sabbath, which coincides with the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which was a Sabbath. So they had to get him in the ground before the first day of the unleavened bread Sabbath turned up, because they're not allowed to work on that Sabbath. It's not their normal Sabbath, it's the Feast of Unleavened Bread Sabbath. And they had to get him down in the ground. There's 3 hours of darkness from the 6th hour to the 9th hour. The 6th hour is what we call noon. They call it the 6th hour. And the 9th hour is 3 p.m. Jesus died. He dies importantly during the Passover because he is the Passover lamb. He needs to die on the Passover. So that fulfills that. But he's only got a few hours to be put in the ground. So we have the 14th of Nisan, the Passover. We have the 15th of Nisan, which is day 1 of the unleavened bread feast. Then we have day 2. Then we have day 3. Day 3 is the Jewish normal Passover. Day 2 is where the ladies go and get the spices and the ointments, because they hadn't had time to collect those things before they hurriedly wrapped him in linen and put him into the tomb which was reserved for Joseph of Arimathea. They were then waiting for the unleavened bread first day Passover to finish. Then it was going to be a normal day, day 2 of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which coincides with the Jewish Friday. And so they could then go to the market and buy the things that they needed to prepare the body for burial, because they hadn't been able to do that. They did that. Then all of a sudden, the normal Passover is upon them, which is the Jewish Saturday. So when they turn up on Sunday, what we call Sunday morning, he's gone. And it's 3 days and 3 nights. Everybody see that? If you give me your email, I'll send you a PDF on this if you want me to. 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th. So we've got the timeline. Passover, first day of unleavened bread, which is a Sabbath, a normal day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the third day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which coincides with the standard Jewish Passover, 3 days, 3 nights, sign of Jonah. Easy. Here are the scriptures to back it all up. I'm not going to go through them all. Importantly, the Passover lamb is it's slaughtered on the evening of the Passover. That's fulfilled. Jesus is taken in the Garden of Gethsemane around about midnight. The cock crows. Jesus is scourged. He dies. Jesus dies at the 9th hour, or around about 3 p.m. John 19:31, down the bottom, the Jews therefore, because it was the preparation, the body should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day, for that Sabbath day was a high day, or day 1 of unleavened bread, just before sunset. And I'll show you again. Any questions? If you've got questions, we'll answer them. Serious. Because it's here now. We can go back through it very quickly. Please don't be ashamed to ask a question. Stunned silence. Okay. Your exam papers are at the back. So before you can go home to your fish and chips, you have to pass. Yes, Monty?
So, looking at that, just to make sure I've got this right about time was running, did he rise on day 3 or where did
4.
where it says Christ is risen?
Yeah, that's after day 3. We don't know when he rose, but he rose in that day. Because when they turn up, it's morning. Yeah? So they turn up on our morning, which is 12 hours into day 4, essentially. Yeah? And he's gone by then. So we don't know it doesn't say what time he rose, but he was definitely in the grave 3 days and 3 nights. Any other questions? We're done. Thank you. No clapping? No clapping.